כמה שעות אחרי שראש הממשלה נתניהו הודיע שהחקיקה המשפטית תחודש, באוניברסיטת רייכמן התארח אחד מהמומחים הבולטים לתהליכי כרסום הדמוקרטיה בפולין בשנים האחרונות, פרופסור סדורסקי. אנחנו רוצים לצרף אותו עכשיו לשיחה איתנו ולבדוק את המקום שבו ישראל נמצאת ביחס לפולין. Good afternoon, Professor Sadurski. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Sadurski, what is your impression of the Israeli political and judicial crisis?
Well, my main impression is how many similarities there are between what's going on here in Israel and what I know from my own experience and also from my study about Poland and Hungary. And the main similarity is that both in Poland and Hungary, and I now see it repeated in Israel, the assault by the executive for self-aggrandizement, for reinforcing his powers, starts with courts. Courts are the first target of an attempted capture by the executive in all these three countries.
You have developed a theory about the stages that transfers a regime from a democratic one to autocratic one. So can you explain again what are those stages and which one, if so, does Israel find itself in?
Well, the first stage is to depict your opponents, that is the political opposition, as the enemy which has to be combated rather than collaborated with. So the opposition is presented as illegitimate. That's the first point. The second point is to capture judges and courts, mainly through the ways of appointing judges, because judges are umpire. Judges are the institution which is meant to limit and constrain the executive. So unless the executive may enlist judges as its supporters, it will not achieve any of its other goals. Point number three would be to try to control and capture media as much as you can, mainly public media, but also, for example, starve private media of their funds. The next point, it's already, I think, number 4, would be to try to control civil society, NGOs. On the one hand, you fight and try to limit critical NGOs which are anti-governmental, but also you help establish pro-government NGOs.
All right.
And the last point is you create the whole class of business people, of industry, of wealthy people who are dependent on you, who are dependent on state subsidies, on public procurement, on privileged treatment. So you have the oligarchs which are connected with the political elite. These are the steps on the road from democracy to what you call in Israel dictatorship, but what I prefer to call authoritarian.
So in what stage does Israel find itself right now?
Well, I'm not expert enough on Israel,
all right,
and I prefer to talk here about my experience from other countries and not to teach Israelis about what's going on here. But I would say definitely it is past point number 1. That is, government is trying very hard to control judicial appointments, to limit the power of the Supreme Court, because Israel, in a sense, is a unique case, not having a written constitution and not having the traditional checks and balances, such as the second chamber in the parliament, or a powerful president, or powerful local government, etc. Basically, everything depends on the government, because the government, by definition, has legislative majority, and the only constraint are courts. Elsewhere, you have some other constraints, such as powerful president, or ombudsman, or different other institutions which control the executive. Here it is only the judiciary. So you can do two things to the judiciary. On the one hand, make sure that you control judicial appointments. On the other hand, you weaken the judiciary, for example, by not allowing it to strike down laws, or by inventing legislative override over judicial decisions. Then you have eliminated the only meaningful constraint on the executive in your country.
Professor Sadurski, many Israelis say that the country is in urgent need of judicial reform. What do you have to say to these people?
Well, look, I would say every country is in need of judicial reform at any time. The judiciary is a branch which is outside normal accountability mechanisms. And in a sense, it's a good thing. We don't want judges to be accountable to the electorate. We don't want judges to be elected in popular elections. We want them to be above politics rather than being part and parcel of politics. But on the other hand, obviously, this non-accountability creates all sorts of dangers. Dangers of corruption, dangers of arrogance, dangers of ignorance, etc., etc. So we must keep always be vigilant about not allowing judiciary to become too huge power in itself. On the other hand, a great American constitutional scholar called the judiciary, as I quote, the least dangerous branch. I mean, they don't have their own enforcement mechanism. They don't have their own big budget, except the budget necessary to run the courts. And their power is only based on their persuasion. In the end, they don't own troops, the military, the police, etc. So while we should be vigilant about what courts are doing, we shouldn't try to control them too much, because if we do that, then they will become just like the executive, like the government. And we want them to control the government rather than be part of it.
Professor Sadurski, thank you very much for this interview and enjoy your time here in Israel.
Thank you so much. Great being here. Thank you.